This is Learning Target 14, Day 2. We're going to be taking those arithmetic formulas we started to look at yesterday and writing an equation for them. So our equation is going to look like y equals b plus mx. And this might look kind of familiar to you if you remember the linear unit from last year. But today we're going to be using it for sequences. So b is the starting value for our sequence, meaning the first number in the list. And m is our amount of change, or our common difference. We started looking at that yesterday. So let's take a look at how that works. Our essential question today is, how do you write a formula for an arithmetic sequence? Another word that we could use instead of formula is equation. So depending on which term you prefer. All right, so our first sequence in example 1 is 4, -1, -6. So the first step in writing the formula is determining the starting amount, and we're going to identify that as b. So b is our starting amount, and the first term in the sequence is 4. Next, we need to find that common difference. So we figure out what we're adding to the previous term. 4 minus 5 is -1. -1 minus 5 is -6. So we represent that as m, our amount of change is -5, and then we just substitute those right into the formula. So our equation, or our formula for our sequence, is y equals 4 plus -5 times x. If your common difference is negative, you can also just drop that plus sign and have 4 minus 5x. What this formula is useful for is to find, say we want the 20th term in the sequence. We don't have to list out every single term to get to the 20th term. We can substitute 19 in for x and solve for the 20th term. The reason we substitute 19 is because we started with what's technically term 0. Because the 0th term is 4, the first term is our -1, and I'll show you how that works, because I know that's a bit confusing. So let's say we substitute 1 for x. 4 minus 5 is -1, which is, looking at our sequence, it looks like it's the second term, but our first term was the 0th term. Our starting term is at 0, and then the next term is term 1. So that's why we would substitute a 19 instead of a 20. All right, so part B, same process. First we figure out our starting value. That's easy, it's just the first number in the list, and we call it b. And then we figure out our common difference. 2 plus 6 gives me 8. 8 plus 6 gives me 14. So our amount of change is 6. Substituting that right into our formula, we get 2 plus 6x. A couple more examples, slightly more complicated than the ones on the first page. So let's just follow our process. Determine the starting amount. So in sequence 3, we have a starting term of 3. Same thing, figure out that amount of change, that common difference. Another way to go about it, especially as the problems get a little bit more challenging, is to subtract the second term from the first term. So we have 4.5 minus 3 is 1.5. 6 minus 4.5 is 1.5. And 7.5 minus 6 is 1.5. So our amount of change is 1.5. Substituting those into our formula, we get an equation of y equals 3 plus 1.5x. One more example, we couldn't leave out our fractions. So these don't have a common denominator. So if you're trying to find that common difference, it might be helpful to get them all with the same denominator. Well, our common denominator is 4, so we've got 1/4. Multiplying by 2, we get 2/4. And multiplying by 4, we have 4/4. Now it's much easier to find that common difference. So our starting term is 1/4, and our common difference, it's much easier to see we're adding 1/4 to each previous term. So our equation is going to be 1/4 plus 1/4 x. And here are your try problems.